There's an item in Dragon's Dogma 2 that reduces all the damage you deal to 1. That item is the Ring of Derision, and there's only one reason it exists at all: to be used in challenge runs, which is why I'll be beating the whole game with this ring equipped. Even the weakest of monsters have hundreds if not thousands of health, so we're gonna have to play smart to make up for our attacks only dealing 1 damage. The rules for this run are incredibly simple. I must spawn in the Ring of Derision at the start of the game and can never take it off. Pawns are banned and I can't revive myself with wake stones or heal exploits. The challenge is complete once I trigger the final cutscene and post game. Now let's get started. Our volunteer for this challenge run will be none other than Shadowheart from Ballsack Gay 3. All our attacks will be dealing 1 damage, just like how Shadowheart gets 1s on all her attack rolls. I pick Mage as our starter vocation like always, and we are given immediate control over our character. This is great, because it means I can spawn in the Ring of Derision and equip it right away. While we're on the topic of mods, you can find links to everything I'm using in the description. All my mods are purely visual or UI related and have no impact on gameplay. Just as we're about to conclude our slave labour shift, the mines are attacked by a Medusa, and as you can see, the Ring of Derision is doing its job.
1!
Shadowheart sprints past Medusa to skip the encounter, then boards Griffin Airlines out of the tutorial zone. Now that Shadowheart isn't eating airplane slop or being forced to shut while 40,000 feet in the air, we use these starting gobbos to farm discipline points and test out the Ring of Derision. Each ticket damage from Flagration only deals 1 point, but when we apply the burning status, it does normal damage. This means that our direct attacks are affected by the ring, but status conditions are not. This is honestly huge, and I was able to take out the next batch of goblins easily with a mix of burning and throwing. When a thrown enemy hits the ground, they take normal ragdoll damage, so gravity is another tool we'll make use of in this run. Shadowheart is now tasked with making her pawn, and it would be funny to make Lae'zel, but that's way too much effort. Instead, I pick a default preset and throw her into the river. My current goal is to reach rank 2 with Mage, so I set out to help the soldiers rescue Ocado. Thanks to Mage's base stats, our defenses are terrible, but we'll fix that soon. I utilise the burning status effect and the most powerful school of magic, gravity, to clear out more enemies and finally reach rank 2, saving Ocado in the process. I also learnt that throwing objects at enemies isn't affected by the Ring of Derision either. I return to the guards for my reward and buy a Potrapazum from the Vocation Guild for 30% magic resistance. Then I use my remaining discipline to swap to fighter. Swapping to a vocation for the first time at the guild gives you a free armor set depending on what you swap to. Since we changed to fighter, we have a whole basic iron set right away. Shadowheart makes her way to Melve, taking care while dispatching all the enemies for more discipline points. With fighter, I can easily trigger staggers and knockdowns, which lets me pick up and throw enemies. The Ring of Derision only reduces the total damage we deal and has no impact on knockdown damage. I also learnt that wall slams are unaffected by the ring, dealing normal damage. Fighter is definitely more comfortable to play solo than Mage, although the damage is worse. At this point, I still had no idea what build to go for. Now in Melve, we undergo an exposition-induced flashback, but end it early by jumping off a cliff, and in a shocking turn of events, we see Shadowheart get fingered by someone who isn't Lae'zel for once. After recovering from that traumatic experience, I loot Melve and do some basic menial labour until I have 8,000 gold. This is so I can buy the Ring of Resolution from this wandering merchant, which gives 100 stagger and knockdown resistance per ring. After getting enough gold to buy the ring, I undergo one of my greatest brain farts of all time and run straight past the merchant to leave Melve with the guards. I didn't notice that I completely forgot to buy the ring until the next real life day. The soldiers escort me out of the village and they help take out enemies on the way. I utilise the pre-established methods to dispatch the enemies, earning a nice amount of discipline. Once we get to the Cyclops, my execution is far sloppier than usual, but it dies nonetheless after some rocks to its cranium. I take the ox cart to Vernworth with the guards and arrive safe and sound. Now in the city, it's time to take what we've learnt and figure out a game plan going forward. Throwing is not affected by the ring, but that's not going to cut it for a main source of damage. We need something more consistent, which is why a burning damage build is my current choice for this challenge. but there's still more we need to learn regarding how the Ring of Derision works. Before doing anything else, I take out an Art of Metamorphosis that I got with my Super Evil Pay to Win Deluxe Edition bonuses. This is so I can change Shadowheart's race from half-ling to half-elf. Then I buy Metal from Rank 2 Fighter for 30% physical resistance, then swap to Thief, buying Enkindled Blades right away. I completed Heal of History and A Beggar's Tale, then grabbed 5 Seekers tokens from around the city. By handing them into the Vocation Guild, we're given a Ring of Vehemence, which grants 100 knockdown damage. Because we have the Ring of Derision equipped at all times, we only have one spare ring slot. Since Stagger and Knockdown are useful for picking up small enemies, I'll be using the Ring of Vehemence for the rest of the game. After that, I take an ox cart to the checkpoint rest town, miraculously avoiding any ambushes. I quickly complete the Jadeite Orb quest for gold and an elite tent to replace my shitty modest one, then it's off to Windworn Gully. I'm able to somewhat successfully sneak past the Rattlers and arrive at the cave. There's a massive horde of them in here, so I start luring them off the nearby cliff before getting bored and making a run for the chest. I have one very close call, but managed to escape with a new set of daggers, bolts from the blue. I wanted to know if the Ring of Derision affected the bonus damage from enchanted weapons, and after testing it out, unfortunately it does. Enkindled Blades also can't override permanent enchantments, so I'm forced to use normal daggers in order to make use of its fire effect. Fire is the most useful element for this run, because burning ignores the Ring of Derision. This has strengthened my resolve in making a fire build. I put bolts from the blue in storage for now, because I'll need them for later, and head back out. Shadowheart is able to burn a few enemies to death with Enkindled Blades, but it's still a rather slow process. We find a Cyclops near our destination and decide to take it on. There are plenty of rocks to throw in this area, but after those run out, I'm dependent on burning damage. Cyclops are resistant to fire, which makes applying burn a little difficult. After a long fight, it finally dies, and I make my way to our intended destination, the Griffin Nest. Shadowheart cushions her fall using the creature's spine, then promptly sets it on fire. While it's writhing on the ground, she steals all the loot in its nest, and most importantly, a port crystal, before sprinting out into misty marshes. She weaves past all the zombies and ghosts and makes it to the cliffside, escaping the marshes with little to no issue. There are multiple harpies up in the mountain, but they fall easily to Enkindled Blades. Despite that, I still really want to unlock Implicate because it would make things a lot easier. Once the harpies are dealt with, Shadowheart arrives at the Sphinx's shrine. I put down the port crystal we got earlier and add every riddle except Conviction to my quest log. I teleport back to Vernworth and get my finder's token from the fountain. While I'm in the city, I buy the Shadow Cloak skill, then talk to Brant. I completed Deesa's plot and the Cage Magistrate main quests, but don't hand them in yet. Instead, I run back to my house and sleep until the morning. I take another ox cart to the checkpoint rest town and somehow avoid yet another ambush. I buy the cheapest archstaff at Celeste Smithy, then duplicate the jail key Brant gave me. I'll need it for later. Once the forgery is complete, I kidnap the NPC closest to me. It happened to be Dante. Shadowheart teleports herself and her new boyfriend to the Sphinx. She's able to use him to complete Riddle of Madness for a second port crystal, then submits him again for Riddle of Wisdom, intentionally getting it wrong. You can't solve Wisdom unless you have a pawn, so I always give the wrong answer during solo runs and move on. Shadowheart also hands in her finder's token for 3 fairy stones. Next is Riddle of Eyes. The goblins in here are a bit higher level than usual, so I'd rather not risk them spotting me. Shadowheart uses Pass Without Trace, I mean Shadow Cloak, and grabs the ceiling file above the entrance, before handing it to the Sphinx. We just have the Riddle of Conviction left, but I leave it incompleted. I need to save this riddle for later. Afterwards, I go back to Vernworth and unlock Sorcerer using the Archstaff I purchased at the checkpoint rest town. I ignore Warrior, however, because I won't be using it for this run. I hand in the 2 main quests I completed earlier and collect the next batch. Shadowheart then exits the gates to farm some discipline. We only need to reach rank 2 with Sorcerer, so this won't take long. Using Thundermind for knockdown and Flagration for burning, Sorcerer is a great vocation for bypassing the Ring of Derision's debuffs. Shadowheart burns some more enemies and reaches rank 2 with Sorcerer, before heading back to Vernworth. Now at rank 2, we can buy the Augment Asperity, which makes it 20% easier to apply debilitations. With this, I should be able to set enemies on fire a little bit faster. I swap back to Thief and complete an unsettling encounter with no issue, then get through the Masquerade quest afterwards. I hold off on turning them in and instead take an ox cart to Melve. A lesser dragon is currently attacking the village, so I run up to the ballista to line up my shot. Shadowheart fires at the dragon, only to realise that the Ring of Derision affects ballista, meaning we're only dealing 1 damage per shot. Considering that lesser dragons have 100,000 health, I immediately ride off killing it and let it fly away. It drops 2 Worm's Life crystals, but we need 15 total for the main quest. Normally I just kill the lesser dragon here for an easy 10, but since that's not an option, we'll have to think of something else. Heading back to the city, I managed to get Thief to rank 3, purchasing Ensnare and the Bump and Lift core skill. This core skill might be what helps us deal with our Worm's Life crystal problem. Now it's time to complete the monster culling main quest, so I head to Eastern Vermin to dispatch the goblins and saurians nearby. Burning and throwing is more than enough to get rid of this lot, so Shadowheart makes her way further into the forest. A Minotaur blocks the path, and after playing around with it for a bit, she gets bored and heads into the nameless village. We have another main quest here called the Stolen Throne. Shadowheart talks to the Thief Meister in the village and learns the skill Blades of Pyre, which is going to be our new burn applicator. Shadowheart proceeds to temporarily star in an episode of Wipeout, greatly impressing the true Thief Meister. This is where we get the main quest item we need and the skill Formless Feint. There's some pretty solid thief loot in this room, so Shadowheart helps herself. It may seem pointless getting stronger daggers, because no matter what, we'll only deal 1 damage. But remember that knockdown damage is unaffected by the ring. As she's walking back to Vernworth, Shadowheart reunites with the Minotaur from earlier and decides to test out her new skills. Blades of Pyre is a self-damaging skill that releases a giant fire explosion. Formless Feint makes you immune to damage as long as it's active, so combining both to use Blades of Pyre with no drawbacks is a common meta build, but we don't get anything out of Pyre's explosive burst damage. Instead, we're using it for its very high burn application. Combined with the Asperity Augment from Sorcerer, which lets us apply debilitations 20% easier, Blades of Pyre can very easily inflict burn on most enemies in the game. There are 2 major drawbacks to burning. First off, our build is completely shut down if it happens to be raining or if they're drenched from a nearby water source. And secondly, enemies become more resistant to debilitations the more it's applied to them. So the more we burn an enemy, the longer it takes to apply it again and the shorter it lasts. This means boss fights still take a very long time, so I'll be avoiding direct combat against large monsters for the most part. With smaller enemies, I can use Ensnare to knock them over, then throw them around or slam them into walls, so there's very little issue here. I walk back to Vernworth to sort out my items, then it's time to head to Trevor Mine. With the mine clear, the last stop was Har Village. On the way there, I triggered a Cyclopean bridge, then blasted him down into the river for some easy XP. Nearby was a Drake. Do you remember the Bump and Lift core skill I purchased earlier? Every basic attack has a chance of stealing an item from the enemy, so I attacked the Drake until I managed to steal 5 Worm's Life crystals from it. After that, I baited out its Fire Breath attack until it walked into the river, instantly killing itself. On a nearby rock is an additional Worm's Life crystal. We now have 8 out of the necessary 15 crystals. I kill almost everything I clap eyes on during the trek to Har Village to farm discipline points, including an ogre that uppercut me into the stratosphere, only to burn to death as I recovered on the ground. Finally at Harv, Shadowheart helps herself to some spell tomes Sigurd graciously lets her borrow, then kidnaps him so he can help us kill the saurians inside the cave. With his help, we take out the first slot easily, but when you pick up an NPC too much, they become hostile. Tired of Shadowheart's abuse, Sigurd went full anime on her ass, and she decided to just clear the cave on her own. With that done, I teleport back to Vernworth. Now that my thief is rank 5, I purchase Pilfer and use it to pickpocket some valuable items from the nearby NPCs. It's been a while since I spoke to Brant, so I hand in monster culling as well as several other main quests and continue on to the coronation. This is just a short cutscene, but completing it brings us to the second stage of the main quest. The next day, Brant tells us to head to Bhaal, and thanks to our border pass, we could actually get there legally. But this is Dragon's Dogma, and crime always pays in these games. I head to Checkpoint Rest Town and sneak into an ox cart intending to cross the border. Doing this is considered a crime, which is good for us. Once it gets through the border gates, I hop out and let the guards beat me up. Shadowheart is arrested, and this teleports us to the Bhaal jail. We've just skipped walking across the entire desert to reach the city. Using the jail key I duplicated earlier, I'm able to walk out of prison with no issues. Now in Bhaal, I activate the Pork Crystal and do a bit of looting, then get some drinks with Empress Nadinia's girlfriend. After that, I purchase a house, then teleport back to Harv. This may seem like a strange decision, but it's because a Drake spawns right outside the village. I plan on using Bump and Lift to farm more Worm's Life crystals. After a few minutes, the Drake runs out of drops, so I run away and cross the nearby bridge to the next Drake spawn. By the time I'm done farming it, I have 23 Worm's Life crystals. Since we only need 15 for the main quest, you might be wondering why I have so many. It'll make sense soon. The main quest wants me to head to the shores near Bhaal, which is where I'm to meet Ambrosius, but there's an annoying griffin in the way. I could just let it fly off, but there's no reason to turn down free experience. After a chat with Ambrosius, he tells us to talk to the Dragon Forge. I collect another 5 Worm's Life crystals from his cave, then purchase an unmaking arrow from him for 8 crystals, while also picking the dialogue options that let us proceed with the main quest. Rather than do that, however, Shadowheart teleports back to the Sphinx's shrine. We have one riddle left, the Riddle of Conviction. If you hand an item to the Sphinx, she will create a perfect copy of it for you. I give her the unmaking arrow that I bought earlier. Now that all her riddles are done, the Sphinx prepares to set off for a second shrine. I don't have time to grab the chest and board her at the same time, so I decide to hop on and teleport back to this shrine later. It's a long flight, but we finally arrive at a second shrine. Just by getting here, she'll give you 100k gold. Now we don't have to worry about money for the rest of the game. Some of you might be wondering why I duplicated the unmaking arrow, instead of just doing the Sphinx's second batch of riddles for another one. There's actually a very good reason for that. I am lazy. I teleport back to the other shrine to grab the port crystal I left there, then head to Bhaal to prepare for a long journey. While I was sorting out my inventory, I noticed something was wrong. Have you noticed too? I forgot to grab the second unmaking arrow from the Sphinx's chest. The other chest. Since I had already picked up the port crystal there, I couldn't just teleport back. Thankfully, that's future me's problem, and I head off into the desert for now. Shadowheart has quite a ways to walk, so I use Shadow Veil to sneak past a majority of enemies along the way. Shadow Veil is one of those skills I've always found pretty worthless in normal playthroughs, but it's actually been carrying this run. One of the best things about challenges is finding uses for things in game that are typically useless. Shadowheart sneaks past hordes of monsters until she arrives just outside Medusa's cave. There's a group of bandits lurking outside, so she uses Formless Feint and Blaze of Pyre to kill them all. These enemies are pretty high level, so even with such overpowered abilities, it still takes a while to kill them. With the way clear, Shadowheart finds a somewhat safe ledge and places a port crystal down. That way, when she teleports here later, she isn't gonna immediately be swarmed by bandits after they respawn. My fairy stone supply is getting a little low, so Shadowheart teleports back to Vernworth to stock up. Fairy stones restock every 4 days, so she spams rest at her house to pass the time. Now that that's done, let's go back to the Sphinx's shrine to grab the unmaking arrow we forgot about earlier. Shadowheart takes a cart to the checkpoint rest town and heads to the ancient battlegrounds nearby. It would be faster to take the normal way to the Sphinx, but I'm gonna take the cool way instead. Check this out. First try. I actually didn't know where I was going, so I followed the path until I noticed I was back in Misty Marshes. I spotted the campfire from this height and made my way towards it, using Shadow Veil to hide from the enemies. Then I climbed back up the cliff and went to the Sphinx's shrine to grab my unmaking arrow from the chest. We've basically finished all the required setup for post-game, and can go ahead and wrap up the main quest. Shadowheart heads back to Bhaal because we need to sort out her fashion disaster. After spending far too much on armor, we now look decent and have to head to the northern part of Bhaal. It would be faster to teleport to Vernworth, take a cart to the checkpoint town, and walk from there, but I wanted to save my fairy stones. So let me show you how a true Dragon's Dogma autist fast travels. The Bhaal Griffin Nest is right next to our destination, so I let it take me there instead of walking the whole way on foot. There's our stop. It's time to safely exit the plane. Once we land, I use Shadow Veil to drop the Griffin's aggro faster and avoid the other enemies nearby, safely reaching the Trickster Meister. She tells us to go to Harve for the next part of the main quest, and I grab the Meister's skill 2 to sell later. Shadowheart goes back to Harve, which causes the Grand Sorin ruins to burst from the water. She makes her way through the cavern and meets Rathias in the Everfall, receiving the God's Bane. The exit leads out inside the castle ruins, and she loots the area for equipment to sell. She then hands 15 Worm's Life crystals to Ambrosius so he can repair the God's Bane for the main quest. With the Godsbane in hand, we're up to the Talos encounter. If you've watched my other DD2 challenge runs, you'd know already that I never kill Talos during solo playthroughs. The reason being, you have to summon a pawn to complete postgame if you kill Talos, because the last two bosses won't spawn otherwise. This means we'd be stuck, unable to complete the game without breaking the no pawns rule. We can avoid this by ignoring Talos until the encounter ends. Shadowheart manages to snag a harpy and has it throw her onto Talos. This isn't necessary, I just didn't feel like walking myself to the other side. Once it nears solid land, Shadowheart starts climbing down and walks to the volcanic island camp herself. When Talos is summoned, he despawns every enemy in the area, so we can peacefully make our way over. Now we just have to wait here until Talos finishes his brisk walk through the hinterlands. Naturally, I pass the time by looking for Shadowheart x Lae'zel fanfictions, but I don't find anything that catches my eye, nor do any of the fics I'm following have any updates right now. Instead, I do something more productive, like working on the script for this video. After Talos falls into the lava, I place down a pork crystal and make my way towards the excavation site, where I place down another one, and now we are finally up to the dragon. We're challenged by the fake Arisen, but rather than deal with that, Shadowheart books it in the other direction, skipping the encounter. Once the encounter ends, the dragon gives us a ride. If you crawl towards its heart until your character flashes, you can use the Godsbane in your inventory to stab yourself. This skips the dragon fight entirely and teleports you straight into all the setup that took place during this run was all for this section. In order to complete postgame, we need to defeat 2 giant worms and 2 dragons. Achieving that with the Ring of Derision equipped with head-on combat is practically infeasible, but if you know anything about me, then you're likely aware that I always look for the easy way out of everything. Now in Unmoored World, I use Shadowveil to sneak past all the skeletons and pick up a bunch of fairy stones along the way, until I reach the Seafloor Shrine. After talking with Rathias, I teleport to Sacred Arbor and swap to Archer, before taking my Unmaking Arrows out of storage. Right next to the Arbor Heart is our first boss. Shadowheart equips her Unmaking Arrow and in a very anticlimactic fashion, kills the boss in a single hit. She then teleports to the excavation site where the other worm spawns and does the exact same thing to it. But now we're out of arrows, so how will we kill the remaining 2 dragons? Shadowheart swaps back to Thief after teleporting to Bhaal, then activates the pillar near the palace. This spawns the very scary dragon vase by the entrance and a massive horde of monsters. You know the drill by now. Shadowheart Shadowveils and walks past everything with no issue. These specific enemies deal weirdly high damage compared to everything else in the game, so I was actually a little scared of them. Anything I couldn't sneak past, I dodge with Formless Feint, then lose aggro quickly with Shadowveil. This final gauntlet is usually quite dangerous in challenge runs, but thanks to Shadowveil and Formless Feint, I was able to literally walk past everything and destroy the vase, ending the encounter. With that intermission out of the way, all that's left are the 2 dragons. I grab the bolts from the blue daggers from my storage, then Fairy Stone to the pork crystal I left outside Medusa's lair. Using Shadowveil, I sneak past the bandits by the entrance and confront Medusa. She's incredibly weak to lightning damage and stuns easily, so I wail on her until she collapses to the ground. That's when you can execute her and chop off her head. Unfortunately for us, it seems we're unable to chop it off. I think what's going on here is that the Ring of Derision is nerfing our damage too much, preventing us from decapitating her like usual. Thankfully, I've already got a solution to our predicament. Hello Sigurd, I love you. Shadowheart tosses Sigurd over her shoulder and teleports him to Medusa's cave. He helps me defeat the bandits outside, then I put him inside the ceiling file just as a safety precaution. If anything happens, I can reload to this save and know he'll be inside the bottle, with no risk of despawning on me. I cast Shadowveil, then release Sigurd, before carrying him inside to fight Medusa. Because I was veiled, she aggroes him first, and I can easily climb onto her, using bolts from the blue to apply stun. This isn't the first time I've used Sigurd to help me kill Medusa in a challenge run. His ability to slow enemies and block all damage makes him a pretty decent NPC slave, ally, that isn't a pawn. Once she's down, Sigurd is able to use his duo spear to chop off her head, and Shadowheart receives the last item she needs to complete this challenge. If you're wondering why I didn't grab Medusa's head when I visited her cave before killing the dragon, it's because everything in your possession rots once you enter postgame. In order to use her head in Unmoored World, you need to collect a fresh one. I go back to Vernworth and walk to the dragon boss's spawn point. Shadowveil once again carries as I casually walk past literally everything and summon the dragon down, before equipping Medusa's head. That was a little embarrassing, but at least it's dead. More importantly, you're probably wondering why I used unmaking arrows for the worms instead of just using Medusa's head to kill all 4 bosses. It would have saved me the trouble of getting 2 unmaking arrows after all. The reason being that in my previous challenge run, I tried using Medusa's head on the worm bosses, but it didn't work. It's usually supposed to, and it's possible it would have worked in this save file, perhaps my other save was just glitched, but I wasn't taking any chances, and used the unmaking arrows here to avoid any risk of it happening again. Regardless, we just have 1 boss left, so I teleport to Volcanic Island Camp, summon the dragon, and repeat the process. And that's it. We're done. All that's left is to go back to the Seafloor Shrine so we can watch the final cutscene. To be completely honest, this was the easiest challenge run I've ever completed in the Dragon's Dogma series, but I enjoyed making use of skills I normally never use, and I think with greater investment, a burn build could be pretty fun. This is a challenge I strongly recommend other people try out, because unlike most runs, there are multiple viable ways to complete it. You could try status effect sorcerer, or use spite daggers to inflict poison, even Archer's debilitation arrows. Mystic Spearhand's throw spell also bypasses the ring, and it can use the Infernal Edge duo spear to inflict burning. With Warfarer, you can combine multiple of these ideas together to create a build you generally wouldn't use unless you were wearing the Ring of Derision. Anyway, could you please help me reach 100k subs? I'd really appreciate it. Thanks.